Yeah, I'll sit here. Yeah, you're perfect. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. My name is Julia Quintero, and I am an aspiring teacher. It took a very special high school English teacher of my own to humble me and to help me realize that teaching is what I am meant to do. His name is Mr. Freeble, and he's here with us tonight, and I'd like to dedicate this event to him and to teachers everywhere who humble and inspire their students. Thank you, Mr. Freeble. I am also the founder and president of the Stanford Pre-Education Society, or SPREES. We are Stanford's first pre-professional society for students pursuing careers in education. We understand that careers in education are often overlooked by students at elite institutions like Stanford. We are here to change that. And the first step to change is sparking a conversation that the US desperately needs to have. So we gathered pioneering leaders in the field of education to discuss precisely what SPREES has set out to do. How do we attract our brightest students to careers in education, especially teaching? Our 4 panelists here tonight have honored us with this opportunity. Tonight, we will have the privilege of listening to John Hennessy, president of Stanford University, a computer scientist whose work has revolutionized the computing industry, and now a fierce advocate for educational technology. To Claude Steele, the I. James Quillen Dean of the Graduate School of Education and a social psychology researcher who is famous for his work on stereotype threat, as described in his book, Whistling Vivaldi. To Michael Kirst, Professor Emeritus of Education and Business Administration and President of the California State Board of Education, the policy of the California Department of Education. And to Rachel Lotan, Director of the Stanford Teacher Education Program and a former teacher of middle school and high school English and French. There'll be 3 parts to this evening's program. First, each of our panelists will give a brief speech addressing the question, what careers in education should we be preparing our brightest students to become? And how can we do that? Next, we will have a roundtable discussion examining the teaching profession in particular. How can we attract our most talented students to the teaching profession? And how can we retain them for a career? And finally, we will conclude by engaging in a Q&A with you, the audience. To participate in this Q&A, we ask that you please use your smartphones or the laptop we have set up in the back by the entrance to access bit.ly/SPREESQA to submit your questions, and you can find that link on the back of your programs as well. Throughout the evening, a handful of SPREES leaders will be sifting through these questions to identify a few that are particularly compelling and relevant. Unfortunately, we will not be able to address all of your questions due to time constraints. but we will use tonight's compilation of questions to inform future Sprees events. You can also join in on the conversation using Twitter by tweeting to Sprees_Stanford or by using the hashtag Sprees. And if you like us on Facebook, you can also follow the event if you like our Facebook page. So let's begin with our panelist speeches. And again, the question is, what careers in education should we be preparing our brightest students to become? And how can we do that? Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, President John Hennessy.
Thank you, Julia. Well, I think it helps to start with first an observation that I've made among many high-achieving people I've met in their lives. And I've asked them, who were one of the persons in your life that was most influential in your life? And every single person I've met picks out a teacher along the way. Sometimes it's a math teacher for an engineer, but just as often it's an English teacher or a Latin teacher or somebody who taught history. I think each of us has that kind of encounter and has shaped their lives. As the son of a woman who taught in high school in Bed-Stuy, and then the spouse of a woman who taught down in San Jose, I think we all see the challenge and the rewards of being a great teacher. A number of years ago, when we got a grant from the Carnegie Foundation, I went back for a meeting in this grant, a program called Teachers for a New Era. We got in a long conversation about the education of teachers, and it was my first real exposure to the challenges of preparing next generation individuals to be great teachers. And what became clear was we could inspire young people to go into teaching careers. We could do a great job of preparing them. But we as a society also had to change. We had to be prepared to regard teaching as a high status profession, which in the US not only means according it a status in terms of how people think about it, think about doctors, lawyers. Look at college professors, high status profession, reasonably well compensated. Why don't we put the same attachment to the people who deal with the most valuable asset the US has, our children? So we have to rethink that. And I think you see lots of key measurements that are made. In the US, the vast majority of people who go into teaching careers come from the lower third of the class in terms of achievement in college. In the rest of the world, they come from the top third. In Finland, teaching is the high status profession. You make almost as much as a doctor. In the US, you make about a third what the typical average MD makes if you're in the teaching profession. And of course, one of the worst things about this is that the best teachers don't go necessarily to the poorest districts. And when you look at the degree of preparation and what they're ready for, in many cases, the people who are least prepared go to the most challenging districts. And we're doing the wrong thing from a societal viewpoint. We're doing just the opposite of what we should do. We should be investing more money in the children who are most challenged and come from the toughest backgrounds. Of course, when it gets to the issue of preparing the next generation for what they need to know in science and math, things get worse rapidly. We can't attract enough teachers, particularly in the teaching of science and math, especially when we get to high school. And that plays out in lots of different ways. It plays out in terms of our test scores and how they compare internationally to other test scores. I think we have to re-professionalize the teaching corps. We have to train great people, and my colleagues here will talk about how we fix that. But I think we as a society need to change as well, and we need to put more value on it. And in the US, let's face it, the salary you earn says something about how important your profession is. And it doesn't need to be a one-for-one match. Not all professions have different requirements, but it says something about it. How do we convert it back to a meritocracy? How do we convert it to something where we look at devising probably new methods for looking at how effective teachers are and feed that back into the system and think about how we do that? It's up to us to make that change. if we really want to ensure that the next generation has the kinds of opportunities that I think this country can offer, if the ladder that enables somebody to go from a very poor beginning in a family up to real achievement in the US is going to be maintained, it's going to begin in K-12. It's going to begin when they first come into school and we begin to build that. And we, as a society, owe all our young people a decent start at education and their lives. Thank you.
To the question of what careers in education should we be preparing our best students, maybe I overread my instructions, but I took them to focus on research careers. So I was right?
Yes.
Okay. And I really mean this as research careers that support teaching and schooling in general. And I guess I preface my remarks by saying that in taking this position, I'm not advocating one kind of education career over the other kind. It's just that I have such distinguished co-panelists here who I know will cover teaching very well. So I think I take a shot at making the case for the value and importance of research in education and to ground teaching and education in general in high-quality research in the nation. I think that's something we tend to overlook. I think it can be hard. There is so much sense of urgency, of righteous urgency about our educational system and its needs, that sometimes the case for research can seem like you're advocating for a luxury or something that's sort of slightly beside the point. And so people can have a low tolerance for it. But I want to make the case as best I can today for the importance of research. And to do that, I've taken a sort of unusual approach here. I'm going to use a device that I lifted from what we know as storylines. When you outline a movie, you put the storyline on a board. And when you do that a lot, it turns out that most movies, or lots of movies, boil down to a very simple storyline. And the storyline is something like this. Once upon a time, every day, and then this happened, and then because of that, and because of that, until finally. So I'm going to try to fit my whole case for the sake of being brief and as concise as I can. I'm going to try to fit my whole case for the importance of research into that brief storyline. So you can see if I pull it off or not. I call this story Smart Education, and here it is. Once upon a time, the K-12 schools in the United States began to falter seriously, especially for low-income students. Every day, throughout the land, parents struggled to find good schools for their children. Those with resources tried to move to better neighborhoods or pay for private schooling, while those with fewer resources had to take their chances in an increasingly under-resourced public school system. The nation's educational performance began to falter alarmingly. Then one day, people began to realize that we could be as smart about education as we are about other things, like making scientific and medical discoveries, innovating technologies, forming effective businesses, and institutions of higher learning. They began to realize that we could expand our knowledge and technology to better educate more people. And because of that, they began to invest more in the creation of knowledge about how people learn and how to teach them, and in the development of schooling and teaching strategies, as well as technologies that would deliver better learning experiences to vast numbers of Americans and other people throughout the world. And because of that, the Graduate School of Education at Stanford focused on two grand goals. One, to create a new science and scholarship of education to expand these basic capacities of education. And two, to see if this strategy could improve the performance of large urban school districts such as San Francisco Unified School District. And this effort led other great graduate schools of education to focus on achieving similar goals and not to rest until the knowledge they produced and the smartening of technology that they accomplished could be shown to actually improve American schooling and the professions that support it. Until finally, the U.S. Became again the world's leader in educating its citizens, as well as showing the world how to do this better, which meant that its economy thrived and remained internationally dominant, and that it became again a society in which education offered its citizens a viable route to opportunity, the good life, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's the movie that we see.
And all during your lifetime as dean?
And all during my lifetime as dean. So I thought I'd give just a couple of examples of research that have fascinated me in the last 2 days. One is from an old Stanford colleague who did the marshmallow study. I don't know if you've heard of that, where he found that among 5-year-olds, how long you're willing to wait to get 2 marshmallows rather than eat the 1 marshmallow right in front of you that you could have, the delay time, is one of the best predictors of your SAT score like 14 years later, 5-year-olds to that. So that begins to give us some insight into the kind of characteristics you want to educate people to have. And it can revolutionize, to some degree, the approach we take in schooling. This has been followed up by the economist James Heckman, who's a Nobel Prize-winning economist, who analyzed data from the Perry preschool research, which collected data on both what are called cognitive outcomes and what are also, I don't think accurately, but nonetheless called non-cognitive outcomes. And by that they mean things like self-regulation and ability to control emotions, ability to focus attention, these kinds of skills. So these early preschools taught both kinds of skills, and what do you think predicted later life outcomes like income and marital success and health? It was the non-cognitive outcomes. And this gives you some sense of, this kind of research, I think, lays a foundation of what you want education to focus on. We wanted the schooling to be a really holistic, full experience that allows children to develop a full range of skills and characteristics that many of which may not be the exact performance on a given standardized bubble test today, but may be characteristics that enable them to flourish throughout their lives. I could go on with examples of research that I think have sort of revolutionized how we think about education. We do a lot of research in our school on what might be called the epidemiology of education. Where really are the problems? Where should we focus our policy? Where should we focus our energies? So I'll get a chance to give you some more specific examples, but I just want to put the idea out there that I think, as in the case of medicine, education is something that really should be rooted in high-quality research, and that this can be an incredibly exciting kind of career people can have, that our good students can have in education.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm coming from the policy and other aspects of education other than teachers and administrators. Most undergraduates know about teachers and they know about school administrators. But education is a gigantic industry. The K-12 education alone spends $600 billion. So it's a very large area. California spends $60 billion. So it's very big, and I'll come back to that perhaps in the questions. But what I want to impart is that there's many parts of careers in education that are not either a teacher or administrator. Of course, there's the whole preschool area where you could work in that area, and some of that is teaching and some of that is administration. There's a whole bunch of agencies helping students transition from high school to college, and there are many other kinds of jobs that do not require a teacher certification. Some of the preparation for these jobs that we have at the Stanford Graduate School of Education is a program called Policy Organization and Leadership. We also have, as far as I know, the only joint program, simultaneous program with the MBA and the MA in Education, a program I created in 1969. We now have the Masters of Public Policy here and at other places, and that's basically the route that I came in through rather than from teacher certification and so on, and also the undergraduate area. So to give you an idea of what this is, I'm going to read off some of the jobs that our students from last year's graduating class at the Graduate School of Education attained to illustrate my points. So in no particular order, I have Edu Jigsaw. This is obviously a technology company where technology people are doing new kinds of educational learning. New Schools Venture Fund. This is in San Francisco. This provides venture capital to profit-making and nonprofit enterprises to expand good education ideas. Harlem Village Academies. This is an organization in Harlem which deals with education but also links schools to children's agencies. Schools can't solve these problems alone. The interaction of schools and children's agencies, I think, is vital. McKinsey and Company. They have a large education consulting area. Apple Computer. They do education. And I'm talking about education with a big E. In my career, I've trained people that have headed operas, symphonies. Those are educational, in my view. They went through this joint business program. City Arts and Technology High School. This is a charter school. These schools are public schools, but they have much more flexibility, and they actually don't have to employ certified teachers. The Ministry of Education of Singapore. The African Leadership Foundation. Adler Planetarium. One of our graduates heads the Exploratorium in San Francisco, a major, in my view, educational institution. Mozilla Foundation. Foundations, there's a tremendous amount of jobs now in foundations across the country giving grants to improve education. In the Bay Area alone, Hewlett and Charles Schwab, there's many, many foundations. So other people have gone into preschools. Another graduate went to UNESCO in Bangkok. So UNESCO is obviously doing education and has a major role in education. The Fusion After School Program. This state has hundreds of millions of dollars in after school programs. These don't necessarily employ certified teachers. These are important. They reinforce what we're doing. The New York City Department of Education. Some graduates have been business analysts of how to run the money in the New York City Department of Education or in other administrative jobs there. The Research Alliance for New York City Schools, which is a combination of universities doing research in New York City. American Institutes for Research. RAND Corporation would be another. These are research organizations that have major education research programs to improve education. Stanford University Office of the Provost. And lastly, Boston Public Schools. Many of these people go into various school jobs that are non-teaching. One of the biggest shortages in schools right now is the chief technology officer. We don't pay enough money. We can't get good people. Our technology system, the average school has the bandwidth of the average family, when there's a lot more people in the family than there is in the school. So there are numerous, my message is, there's numerous jobs. These are vital jobs, and there's a lot of pathways into them that you can pursue. And I end with that. Thank you.
So first of all, I would like to thank SPREES, the undergraduates who have given their time and effort to do this event, and a special thanks to you, Julia, for the idea and for carrying it through. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Hear, hear.
So, of course, given my role, my response to the question is, of course, teaching. And let me get the bumper sticker out of the way, which is, teaching is the profession that makes all professions possible. Got that? Okay.
That's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I like it.
Teaching is a profession. And I'm sad that I have to actually defend that, but I'm going to. As professionals, we have the interest of those we serve in mind, the best interest of those we serve in mind. We advocate for our students. That's what professionals do. Teaching relies on a professional knowledge base that helps us make informed decisions in environments that are very complex and very uncertain. Teaching is complex intellectual work. Teaching performance requires specific skills to be developed, honed, and assessed. So that's my first point. My second point is that teaching is a political and a moral act. When we decide what and how to teach, who and where to teach, when we decide why we teach, we are making a political decision. We are expressing our vision and our goal for the future of our society. As teachers, we act morally and ethically. We, in the Stanford Teacher Education Program, one of the things that we emphasize the most is how to develop the teacher-student relationship. The caring that the teacher shows towards the students shape the culture of the classroom, and by extension of the school, and the development of the child or the adolescent that we're in charge of. Effective teaching, this is my third point, effective teaching, or as it is labeled, highly qualified teaching, is achieved through professional preparation. Teachers need to acquire the knowledge base that I talked about that underlies the profession. The performance skills that we need to exhibit are acquired, supported, practiced in extensive clinical practice. In other words, in real classrooms, in real time, for lengthy periods of time, which is why in STEP we have student teaching placements for the whole of the academic year. And I think that the outcomes of such thorough preparation can be exemplified in STEP, the Stanford Teacher Education Program. So I was just sharing with Mike a little earlier the amazing data that we have from a survey of almost 800 graduates for the past 10 years, from 2002 to 2011, of the Stanford Teacher Education Program. So some of you might know that nationally, and people are not sure what the numbers exactly are, but about 50 to 60% of teachers are still in the profession after 5 years. In our survey of the graduates of 10 years, which by the way had a 90% response rate, unheard of in social science research, 75% of our graduates are still teaching in K-12 classrooms, compared to 50. Thank you. Of those graduates, 85% teach in public schools, and 57%, well over half, teach in Title I schools. Title I schools are schools where at least 40% of the students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. So these are schools where students need our teachers the most. 84% are in California. And 96% of those who teach have also assumed different kinds of leadership roles within their schools and in their community. Sometimes more than 2, sometimes more than 3 of those roles. The other roles that our graduates have in education, almost a third of them are in administration. 18% are in graduate school getting ready to become teacher educators themselves. 6% already are professors. And about 8%, of our graduates are in fields other than education. Some of them in medicine, some of them in law, some of them in business, and in companies and nonprofits. So the point that I would like to close with is that teaching as a profession should be high status, should be paid well, because a lot of effort, a lot of passion, a lot of commitment by you young people, by you, Julia, goes into it. So thank you for organizing, and thank you for coming to hear us.
Thank you, Professor Lotan, and to all of our speakers. And that provides us with the perfect transition into the next part of this evening's program. So in education reform debates, the dominating conversation tends to be, how can we identify and remove ineffective teachers? And that's a really important conversation to have. But tonight is about a different conversation, one in which we take a step back from the symptoms to examine the causes. Who are we encouraging to enter the teaching profession in the first place? And how are we preparing them? So now, our four panelists will engage in a roundtable conversation. And we will discuss how can we attract talented students, like the ones that I have the privilege of living and learning with every day. How do we attract them to the teaching profession? And even more challenging, how do we retain them for a long-term career in the classroom? So, I'd like to begin with two interrelated questions that are specific to Stanford, and that is, what can and should Stanford's role be in leading the movement towards drawing talented students to careers in teaching? And how do you want Stanford to be a vehicle to increase the quality and recognition of teaching? President Hennessy, could you start us off?
Sure. Well, I think Rachel's already talked about the STEP program we have, which I think is a program that attracts high talented individuals. I think that is the model, and I think one of the key things that Professor Lotan mentioned is the notion that the clinical side of preparing teachers should start from the very beginning. I don't know how many of you have seen this data, but if you look at teacher education programs in many parts of the country, the cost spent to prepare a teacher is lower than almost any other major in the university. We're sending a message right there about the importance of this profession. And one of the reasons it's so low is students largely sit in classrooms instead of engaging in clinical activities, because it takes a lot more effort to monitor and to give students the right feedback. But that's exactly the wrong thing to do. If some young person wants to go into teaching, we should start getting them to the clinical side right away. We've reformed medicine this way. We used to teach medicine. You come in first 2 years, you just sit in a classroom, you never get engaged in the clinical side of medicine. Then we found out this is a terrible way to teach people. You don't deal with the issues of how do you know somebody is going to be a good physician if they can't talk and engage with patients. So we need to rethink how we do that. We need to attract better people. And we need, and I think one of the things that STEP can really play a role in, and is playing a role, is in developing high-quality teacher education programs. Here's a model program. Teachers stay, teachers are successful. How do we get other institutions to aspire to that kind of high-quality program?
I want to also point out, because that the Graduate School of Education does a number of things down on the ground in relation to undergraduates that is aimed at getting them interested in education without distracting them from a content interest, because I think that's a very important thing. Is that it's important? It's, I guess, by law in California, but it's certainly a wise thing for a teacher to get a major in a content area and to learn teaching and education and schooling skills in addition to that. So we do have now in the GSE an education minor, and an increasing number of students who are interested in taking it as a minor, and that's kind of an ideal combination with another major for entering into the teaching profession. We also have a theme house. I'm looking at Christina out here somewhere, yeah, who's the RF, the resident fellow, along with her husband, Anthony Antonio, in our Education and Society theme house is the term. So that is another way to do it. We have an honors program that I find exciting to go to every year. So we have a number of outreach efforts. It's a graduate school, but we have a number of outreach efforts to expose the career of education and teaching in particular to our undergraduates, and we hope that begins to make it a kind of normative, maybe even cool thing to do. You know, we have a very mixed feeling. Here I'm about to get into a controversial area. I have to be careful.
Okay. That's all right.
But I don't know, you can't talk about education very long without doing that, so I'll leap in.
Otherwise, don't say anything interesting if you're not.
Don't overinterpret this, but we have a very complex feeling about Teach for America because of the kind of impact that they can have in schools and in the like. They can contribute to turnover and to some of the things we're talking about right here, trying to reduce, like short-term teachers that teach for very brief careers, and the impact that can have in schools, and the lack of training. So I can go on in that list. However, they've kind of made education cool at a lot of schools and gotten a lot of people interested in education. So and having careers in education. So you know, to that I think it demonstrates that there is a deep interest out there in undergraduates at very good schools like Stanford to take up careers in education and become teachers. What we do with that interest, how we mobilize it, you know, we have to figure out how to do a very good job of that. But that at least stands as a test that there is this interest out there.
And I think, you know, on Teach for America, we can take the things it does do well, which is to expose a group of highly educated individuals to the challenges, the inequities, the dilemmas that we face. And if they go on to become voting citizens and champions for improving schools, I can live with that. It's not going to solve the teacher. It's not going to get long-term, highly qualified teachers. That's not what it really does. But we can live with some of these other things are good things to do as well.
I'm just going to give Rachel equal time on that.
Yeah, I know, but we know the data. We know the data.
I'm not going to bite on that one.
Oh, you're not going to bite on that?
I'm not going to bite on that one.
I thought we would really get a...
No.
All right.
But I do want to have, Mike, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll start from a broader perspective, and I think back up to where President Hennessy ended. So I'm a state official in California, and we have 310,000 teachers. Yeah. 60 to 65% of them are prepared by the California State University system, San Jose State, Los Angeles State, and so on. These are were originally called normal schools. They were two-year programs. That's part of the problem of prestige, I think, with teaching. It goes back deep into our history where you needed a two-year degree. Then they were called teachers' colleges, then they were called state colleges, then they were made state universities. So they're the big workhorse of the system, the Cal State system. And then there's a set of for-profit and non-profit, non-selective institutions, and they account for another 25%. So the selective institutions like Santa Clara University and UC system and Stanford, I would estimate around 10 to 15% of our supply. So if you're to look at the big problem that I look at when I get in my desk in Sacramento, it's how do I change this big thing? And therefore, what we need are approaches that really show the way for how to do it. And particularly, I think one area that we're looking at the state more closely is beefing up what we already have, which is some kind of end of experience where you demonstrate that you can do this job. And Rachel can maybe talk about, you know, the ending of professional education. It's sort of like the driver's test. You take a multiple choice test and then you have to go out and drive the car. I still can't park, and you know, and that's the hard part, is the actual performance of it. So I think we need a much more focus on whether you can perform at the end of this. Rachel and Linda Darling-Hammond and others at Stanford have been thinking about this. One of our professors, I would add, Linda Darling-Hammond, is the head of the state's California Teacher Commission. And we live very close to each other, so two of us in 3 blocks away are in these jobs. The final thing I'd mention is that California's had this quirky thing that goes back to 1965, where the view was you should get an undergraduate education in your subject matter, and all teacher training should be at the master's level. And that meant you had to jam the whole thing into roughly 10 or 11 months. And then the state expanded the requirements you have to have as a teacher, more and more courses. So the courses got very short. You know, you get 6 weeks in special education course and so on. So now we finally passed a law allowing this to take place in undergraduate and graduate. And I think it takes that long to do it well. And so that would be another area where we've started an undergraduate program at Stanford, and where we could really point out how do you merge the undergraduate with a graduate level, which is not being done in most of all of the institutions in California. They're mostly graduate level, and they are not master's degrees like Stanford. You get a certificate. So they are certificated programs, sort of like a vocation, if you will, and you succeed to it by passing these courses with so many units.
So Michael, can I ask you a question, because you're involved in the state policy issue? Given this data that says that it's very hard until teachers have a few years of experience to figure out who really is a good teacher, who's going to be a great teacher, who's going to be successful, how can we have a system that gives teachers tenure after, I think it's 2 years or a very short period of time, and has to make a judgment when it's simply too early to make that judgment?
Yeah. I think it's way too early. 2 years is too early. It's a state law. The Governor Schwarzenegger had an initiative on the ballot to extend the tenure period for more than 2 years, and over 60% of the voters voted no. So
there was a big campaign against it.
Yeah, there was. I agree, and there will be again. So now we're getting into the bloody politics of education, which is...
So why do we code this in law? I mean, we don't code this about any other profession where after this year you become a permanent member of that profession.
Well, it's an historical artifact like a lot of things in education. Teachers were not allowed to join unions and were non-unionized for many years. They didn't unionize across the United States until the 70s. In California, it was 75. So the argument the teachers' organizations made is, well, we have no protection from unions, therefore we have to go to the state and get these laws. So we passed these laws on 2 years of tenure, hard to dismiss teachers, and things of that sort. And then when collective bargaining came in 75, we didn't repeal those laws and say, you bargain those locally, which is a rational decision. We just piled the collective bargaining on top of the existing state laws. And we have been unable politically, either by votes of the people or through the legislature, to change these around. So I don't have a rational answer. I'll give you a political answer and a historical answer. But that's part of my field, is understanding that as well.
So let me take the question back to Stanford students. I don't know, I really haven't heard of any other university president of a R1 university like President Hennessy to come out so clearly and so powerfully in support of education in general and teaching as a profession. So we thank you every day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And of course, Dean Steele, well, both President Hennessy and Dean Steele, to be rather crass, put their money where their mouth is. And so in addition to the fact that Stanford undergraduates are leaders, they want to have impact on the world, they want to change the world, and as I explained earlier, you do that through teaching. I think that what we have, which makes us so lucky, is we have very significant fellowships. We have a forgivable loan that is up right now up to $15,000 for 4 years of service. That makes just the thought of spending an additional year at Stanford a little more manageable. It's really important. We know that from people who apply, from people who come to STEP, how important that is. That when you take on a loan of, another $60,000, you don't go out and make $38,000 the first year that you graduate. And then, of course, we attract by providing the best preparation possible. And the numbers that I quoted earlier, I think, speak for themselves. I think that the fact that our graduates stay in the profession is not only because of their commitment and passion, but also because they're well prepared. So I'm not sure that I have a lot to add to the conversation about the tenure after 2 years. But just a few weeks ago, we got an email from one of our graduates who in her second year of teaching was nominated Teacher of the Year in Florida. She lives in Florida. We have those stories quite often. They're Teachers of the Year, they are teachers of the school, whatever. The beginning teacher providers have had to develop a separate track for STEP graduates because they're so advanced, and principals say that our graduates perform like third-year teachers at least. And it's due to the program and who they are.
So building off of that success story, what is essential to a high-quality teacher education program? And of course, STEP is an exemplary program, and so what do we need to change about the way we prepare teachers nationwide? Professor Lotan, would you like to start?
You're the expert.
I'm the expert. So let me tell you what we do in STEP. First of all, I think that the best part of STEP are the students. Our students are accomplished. They are diverse. When we look at the STEP teacher candidates' GPAs and GREs, they are comparable to all the other master's program and to the PhD programs in the School of Education. That's where they are. So they're accomplished, diverse. We have about 50% of our STEP teacher candidates are students of color, and very, very, very committed to the profession. Second, again, it's very rare that an R1 university has professors in the tenure line, full professors, leaders in the field of teaching math, teaching English, teaching science, teaching history, teaching in the Stanford Teacher Education Program. And that's unique. It didn't used to be. STEP didn't used to have that, right, Mike? Years ago. That was not the case. That was Linda brought this about. So we have that. We have outstanding faculty. I think what characterizes STEP is a very tight connection because of who teaches in STEP and who we are, very tight connection between the scholarship and the practice. Call that the DNA of teacher preparation, and it's the double helix, tightly connected. You really could not accomplish an assignment in a STEP course if you're not in a student teaching placement. So people come in the afternoon, they learn something. Next morning, they're in the classroom trying it out, figuring out how it makes sense. Bring back to the university what they experienced in the classroom, and that relationship goes back and forth. Our very, very close relationship with the field is, I would say, extraordinary. Again, we are very fortunate to have on the STEP staff what we call the clinical associates, who are amazing people who are, we call them hybrid educators at home, both at the university and in the schools. And they are at home in both places, go back and forth. And finally, I think what we do quite well in STEP is we practice what we preach. So that when we say you're going to go out and in the schools, you're going to, as a teacher, you're going to commit yourself to equity and excellence, not or, equity and excellence. That's what we're doing in STEP. We're teaching, we're attracting, we prepare excellently and equitably. So that's what it takes.
So I have two comments from the state level. Pardon me. We have 6.2 million children in California. 53% and growing every year are Latino. And we have 1.6 million students, or 25% of our students, who cannot function in English in the classroom. They take an exam which says they are English learners. So this is a particular kind of skill. 87% of these English learners in California Spanish is spoken at home. So to help me, we need many more teachers who can handle these kinds of populations. My own view is we can go through all kinds of training programs, but if they don't know Spanish, and you can't, to me it's just logical that you can move back easily in these languages as you're working with them, that would be really important in the California context. Less important in North Dakota or something if you're going there.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Maybe.
Not
yeah.
anymore.
Not
Yeah.
anymore.
Not anymore, yeah. The other area that we are really struggling with is education of handicapped children.
Yeah.
So when I left, I've been president of the state board twice and under Jerry Brown, and so when I left in '82, special education was 11% of our operating expenditures, and now it's 22%. I've got a curve on autism, which is like that, going up in the state. So again, teachers who are specially prepared for these populations are really important, and we need people to think about this and go into these programs and really work at doing it. And again, I don't think a 10-month master's program is going to really finish the job.
And what are some other important moves that you guys feel that we as a nation need to make to further professionalize teaching?
Well, I think we need to, I think if we professionalize the role that teachers play, I think for better or worse, Americans now believe that there are lots of poor teachers. In fact, I don't think there are lots of poor teachers. There are some in the system, and they become, unfortunately, for so many people who are dedicated teachers, everybody points to the poor teachers. We need to fix this, and I think trying to reprofessionalize the system, figuring out how we we rate and evaluate teachers in a way that's methodical, that understands that classrooms are different, student populations are different, and you can't compare how a teacher does in Palo Alto to how a teacher does in East Palo Alto. That's certainly not a fair situation. So we've got to figure out how to do this, so we do that. And then we've got to make probably the biggest change. We've got to spend more money on young people in this country.
Yeah.
We have engaged as a country in a giant wealth transfer from people under 15 to people over 65. People over 65 vote. In fact, they're the highest percentage voting demographic in the American population. People under 15 don't vote. And often, parents of poor children under 15 don't vote. We've got to fix this problem. We've created a situation where we're sending more and more money to healthcare entitlement programs. We've driven down the poverty level among old people. That's a good thing. But we've driven up the poverty level among young people. And the future, the people who are going to pay for all of us to have Medicare are young people in this country. So we're going to have to rebalance this and address this issue. And if we don't do it, we won't be the country we aspire to be.
I heartily agree with that. I think your question about what needs to happen in order to make teaching a more attractive profession, I think there are a lot of things that come to mind, but sticking out foremost is that we have, as a society, decided that our problems with our school systems are primarily due to bad teachers. Yeah. And that has provided a rationale for a regime of accountabilities that makes going into the field kind of off-putting to people who would naturally be interested in being teachers. But when you worry that your school's funding could be held accountable to student test scores, or that your own salary could be accountable to student test scores, and other accountabilities that you're are going to be exposed to, maybe out of the very best of intentions. I'm not really impugning intentions here, but I'm just observing that the contingencies that we put around the teaching profession make it a very formidable thing to choose to go into. And at the same time that is going on, we have, as John just pointed out, under-resourced the schools. So we're creating a kind of some pretty powerful horns of a dilemma there between not giving people the resources that they need to sustain schools. When you go into our inner cities, it's difficult to argue that those schools have the resources they need to. People do argue it, but I think it's difficult to be persuasive that those schools have the resources they need to be stable institutions of learning for kids. And at the same time, we're imposing on them a regime of accountabilities that makes going in there and giving it a try a very off-putting kind of thing to do. So I think perhaps out of a mix of pretty good intentions and so on, I don't doubt that so much, but I think the pileup of unintended consequences coupled with the clear under-resourcing in schools has made it a formidable profession to go into.
Yeah, naive reforms of complex social systems yield negative unintended consequences. Yeah. And this is exactly what we've seen happen here.
It's getting better.
It is getting better. It is getting better, Michael.
I have some good news on
in
that
California.
front. Yeah, in
California.
California.
Due to you.
Anyway.
Yeah. There's a movement across the country called the Common Core curriculum, and it's a much higher and deeper curriculum, and one that teachers want to teach to. 73% of the teachers said they're enthusiastic about nationwide about the Common Core curriculum. It will end sole reliance we now have in California. All our tests in California are fill in the bubble exam, 4 or 5 choices, closed-end questions, usually a very brief prompt, and then answer a question. That led to sort of scripted textbooks, scripted lessons for teachers Who wants to be a professional that wants to come in and teach a scripted lesson to a scripted textbook and then get a multiple choice test, which costs $12 per pupil to administer, which is what we spend. And to me, that won't work. So we have embarked on an entirely new curriculum, an entirely new assessment system, which will be computer adaptive, meaning if you are answering harder questions, it'll give you harder questions. And we'll also have extended response and performance exams, an exam where you'll have to evaluate an issue like, say, the pros and cons of nuclear power. So we're on the cusp of a change here. I hope politically we can sustain it, but I think this is the kind of thing well-trained teachers tell me, this is the kind of assessment I would be happy to teach to, rather than the assessment you're now giving me, which I think demeans me and is unprofessional. So I think the country's hopefully at a turning point, and the young people in the room will be the beneficiaries of this.
I want to add to that, Mike, because when you enumerated the many problems California has, I was about to get up and walk out. But now I'm more hopeful, because I think that what we need is the existence of what Larry Cuban used to call pockets of excellence and visions of the possible. I think that what STEP provides is a vision of the possible. That if you're right, we're not going to fill the teacher shortage in California with our 76 graduates in secondary and 23 in elementary. We're not. But what we can do is we can be, and we are, a demonstration site. We can show, we can instantiate really well the principles of a powerful teacher preparation program, which is why we've had colleagues from kind of all over the world come and inquire into STEP for a week in February to learn what it is that we do that produces the kinds of teachers that we produce. So I think that that's our role in the School of Education, and I think that that's our role at this university. And that's why we need you, Julia, and you guys here to become teachers and to continue this work and make a difference.
Thank you.
So.
That's a good note to end this on. And now I'd like to move on to the audience Q&A, which I have here. Technology, it's amazing. Our Spree's leaders have, like I said, been combing through the various questions. Oh dear, hold on.
Okay, if technology works.
If the technology works. Sorry about this. Let's see. Can I use your phone? Sorry. This Wi-Fi is not working. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So, Joe Trotterman asked, it was mentioned that Stanford now has a minor in education. What is the reason to not have a major? Rachel Lotan noted the political nature of teaching, where omissions suggest a lesser importance. With that in mind, might offering more classes to undergraduates be a solution? And should education be included among GERs or ways of thinking and doing?
Good.
Well.
Good question.
Dean Steele, would you like to?
Yeah, it's your school.
That's an administrator's.
I keep looking.
We're passing to the administrators here. Right?
Well, I think the reason we don't have a major, and I
That was
confess,
because of the law.
I'm not sure.
That just changed.
Well, you can't have a major in elementary ed, right? I mean,
Right, in education.
In ed, right.
Yeah.
So you would have to have a disciplinary major.
Yeah.
Until recently. I mean, the law just changed recently, I think.
So So, Michael, how did the law just change? That would be the answer I would have given, is that it's
Yeah,
against
well,
the law.
just
And we're at
changed,
graduate school.
saying...
We don't do things that are against the law.
Right, right. Well, this is another history of...
At least they don't tell me when they do.
Why
In front
all
of the
these
president, we're
crazy
not gonna
state
admit
laws.
Yeah. Why do we regulate all this
This
teaching
stuff.
with laws?
Right, yeah, well, the legislature's up there to legislate.
their
Yeah,
reason.
that's their view, and they
Why
send us
don't
100
we have them
education
work just
bills
every
a
other year or something like that?
Yeah, well, they now have taken the lid off, so this question is very relevant. There's no state requirement that inhibits this. Indeed, say a neighboring state like Arizona, I believe they train 90% of their teachers through an undergraduate program.
Yeah, they do.
And so you come up one state away, and it's a graduate program. So now we've taken this restriction away. So I would say the state isn't going to be the problem in the future, but I don't know what the administrative answer would be.
I mean, I think the key thing here is what Rachel mentioned. You need a program that's clinically intensive to really do a good job. And I think you'd have a hard time fitting that in 4 years in the context of general education, a subject area background, which I think we all believe you absolutely have to have. So I just don't think you can fit it in 4 years anymore and still do justice to the clinical experience that teachers need.
Yeah, I do think that's the rub, getting this kind of clinical internship, observed teaching experience in at the same time that you develop real competence in a content area, which is the area you're going to teach in. That's an awful lot to ask out of in a 4-year degree, and so I think that's the rub.
And we do.
It might be more. I mean, it might be possible to arrange things differently, you know, coterms and so on.
Yeah, well, coterms. We do have coterms in STEP, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe that's the right way to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And then you could begin over time to ask the question of, which we're asking now in the medical profession, could you cut the time to get a medical degree by actually doing a little more balancing between the undergraduate program and the graduate program? And you could ask the same thing here. Could you take a year out of the program or 6 months out of the program by blending the undergraduate and graduate experience? And I think that's worth doing. I think it takes us too long to train professionals in many disciplines, and if we could take the time out, we'd probably attract more people. They'd have less debt when they graduated. I mean, lots of good things could happen. Yeah.
The physics department has a program like that, for example.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I really love this next question by a student named Ku. He asked, if our society did professionalize teaching, how do we ensure that excellent and well-trained or well-prepared teachers go into districts that serve the most disadvantaged students? The way the current system is set up, salaries and funding for schools are in large derived from districts within a zip code. Wouldn't well-trained and good teachers be drawn to go into high-paying districts where students there tend to be better prepared and have more opportunities, and they get paid more? And I've thought about this myself, considering the Stanford degree is not cheap, and the teacher's salary doesn't necessarily mirror that, I suppose. So.
Oh, but the rewards.
Yes, the monetary rewards, absolutely.
So I think like an economist on this. I think you should pay teachers in more struggling districts. You should pay them more, not less.
Yes.
Right? You should pay them more. They have a harder job. It's more demanding. They have to be a support structure for young people where they might not have it in a more they might not have to play that role in a more wealthy district. So I think that's the way to solve the problem. How we ever got in this crazy situation where real estate values taxes support school districts, which then mean that there's an attachment between the neighborhood you live in and the quality of the school because it determines how much money they get. It's a kind of crazy system. Maybe we should blow it up and start again. And all you have to do is deal with all the fact that people who live in high-value neighborhoods who think they moved there in order to get their kids in good schools, right?
So let me attach some sad numbers to this. Beginning teacher salary in Oakland is $38,000. Beginning teacher salary in San Francisco is $48,000. Beginning teacher salary in Mountain View, Los Altos is $60,000. That's wrong. That's immoral. That should not be. And I think we need to do something about it.
So let me ask Michael a question, because those
Yes,
numbers
Michael.
sound like they're big. They sound like they're bigger than the actual differential in state funding on a per pupil basis.
That's going to
much
change,
bigger.
I hope.
Yeah.
So
That's
how
gonna
come,
change.
why is that true?
Well,
Taxes
there's
and foundations.
there's partly some of the, well, there's a quirk in the state law for about 4% of the districts where they own their own property tax. It's called basic aid.
Right,
Basic
basic aid
Yeah,
districts.
and so they're exempted from the state system and have high expenditures. But the other, if you take Cupertino, I just spoke down there, they're in the state system. They have a gigantic foundation that parents contribute to,
Yeah.
So that's Palo
which is
Alto.
tax deductible. And then they have
Palo Alto has one
Yep.
too.
Palo Alto has one too.
Yeah, and then they have what's called a parcel tax, where under our crazy state laws, you can't tax property more on the value of the property, but as a
can add
loophole
a
in the
parcel
initiative, you can have I live in a garage and he lives in a mansion and we both pay the same parcel tax of $150.
Seems fair to me.
Yeah, right. So we have parcel taxes. So there's wealthy communities are going to find a way to fund their schools,
Yeah.
even if if there's a tax lid on them. Now, the legislature this year, under the governor's leadership, passed a new school funding law. It will be phased in over 7 years. The low-spending districts will go up by 30 to 40%, and it gives you supplemental payments for all students that are free lunch or low income. If your district has over 55% low-income students, you get another huge bump in your funding. This is just starting. And it also pays for English learners who are not low income. Cupertino has a number of those. And then finally it pays for foster care children. So the past California school finance system was an accretion of historical nonsense. And it was essentially ended up very complex in a flat grant. So we have passed a Common Core curriculum, and we have passed a new school finance program. Oakland's a big winner. I expect salaries over time to go up in Oakland.
Next year?
Yeah, this year, next year. In the budget that starts in July 2014. And so we are working on this, and I think it'll get better. But you're not going to erase these backgrounds. But you have all these teachers going into Title I low-income schools, so why are they going there with an expensive Stanford education? Tell me why.
I asked that question myself.
You know, I
They
would
don't have
stick,
to sign an oath in blood or anything, Rachel?
No, they just choose to go
you
there.
have some
They choose
support
to go
that,
there.
that a
choose to
commitment
go
to
there.
going into those
Yeah.
schools
Yeah.
requires. But I wanted to say something else, because when you
They
think
feel,
about these,
they feel,
feel committed.
sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I think that we have data for this. Our graduates have a very strong sense of self-efficacy. In a questionnaire, there are questions that actually document that. And the link between a sense of self-efficacy and actually being efficacious in what you do and then staying in the profession is quite well established. So there's a strong sense of, I'm well prepared, I know what I do, I can make a difference.
I would stick in here, because I like the kind of things that you're thinking about, Michael, because I feel relatively new to education, and one of the things that I see is that inside each of us, there really are two parts, two faces almost. And one face is a face that is concerned about the public good and sees education as a part of the public good and as a mobility institution and all those kinds of things. So I have that face. But then when I think about my grandkids, I have a consumer's face.
Yeah.
And that consumer's face will almost do anything to
Right.
get
Yep.
an educational advantage for that little guy,
Right.
for whom I know needs every, that's deep. And so how do you control that? I mean, I think the consumer behavior in the education market is driving a lot of the inequalities that we don't like. And the more advantage I have in that market, the more I can actually drive inequalities that favor me. And I can set up not only favorable tax-based situations, but I can set up foundations which require people to give even more money and make my schools even better and get the salary. So you get that kind of and I think only the law and only government, really, this is where you need government as a way of kind of leveling these opportunities out more in society. And I think we need to bring into view that consumer side of us more, because I think that we talk about teachers as if they're supposed to be heroes, to just sacrifice themselves and go up against that and go to Oakland and live under the dangerous, challenging circumstances for the least amount of money and do that out of dedication when I think as citizens, we need to make that a much more attractive situation, a much more likely to succeed situation.
Yeah, the federal government isn't doing much. They only put up 8 cents on the dollar on education. So their money is, at the federal level, is going in the right places, like Oakland, but it's only 8 cents on the dollar. So it's a state and a local issue, and in California, mostly a state issue because of the limits on our local property taxes.
Right. Yeah.
And with all this in mind for our Stanford undergrads, I'd like to end with a question that was submitted in different variations by Stanford students. And that question is, if a Stanford undergrad approached you expressing their interest in teaching, but also their hesitation for a lot of the predictable reasons we've talked about tonight, low pay, low prestige, challenging work environment, what would you say to them? Professor Lotan, would you like to start?
Yeah, I say that every day, many times a day. What I would say is come and visit us and sit in on classes and shadow some of the STEP students, and then go out in the schools and shadow some of the teachers who are STEP graduates. And I think you should also probably consider the alternatives and make yourself a list of, benefits and challenges, and make an educated decision about it. But mostly, I would say, talk to the people who are preparing to become teachers like you, and to some who are teachers. Talk to them. I kind of suspected that this question is going to come up, and so I asked some of the students just in the corridor today, why are you teaching? Why have you decided to come to STEP? And we're beyond the statement of purpose where they apply. We're beyond that. And I wish I had written down the answers because they were so profound and so touching. And I actually do not want to say them to you. I want you to hear them from the students themselves. And I'm sure you're going to be convinced.
Thank you. Professor Kirst?
Well, you have to have a zest for being around children. You're there, and they're there, and you're going to have years with them. And so you have to have that passion. And the other is you're going to have to get a lot of satisfaction from watching those children as they grow and develop, and that what you're really doing with them in terms of making an important difference in their lives. So I think it's really an interaction there between children and teachers and the materials they work with, and now increasingly new technology, I think, will be an important factor.
Thank you. Dean Steele?
My reflex would be to say go into teaching if that's their passion. Actually, John Etchemendy and I were having a conversation the other day. He's preoccupied with the question of what does college what's the add-on value of going to college? And we were talking about our own experiences. And I think this is true for many people, that you get turned on to something in college. That's one of the biggest things that happens to you, that you hope happens to you in college, that you get excited about doing something, you get excited about a way to spend your life, how to dedicate yourself, how to mobilize yourself. And the content is, of course, important, but you forget a lot of it. But the main thing you get is that you get this focus. And so if somebody had that, I'd be loath to tell them to give that up, because I think that's a very powerful, orienting state of mind to be in. And I think, we all go into things not knowing that they're going to be perfect, and you can evaluate yourself crazy trying to figure that out. But the passion is the important thing.
Thank you. And President Hennessy?
So I'd start by asking them what they want out of life. Do they want to live a life that has high impact, that transforms people's lives? Are they comfortable being in a role that serves others? Do they feel enjoyment seeing somebody they've helped succeed and go on to something different? So that's probing about what their real motivations are in life. And if they answer yes to those questions, then I tell them to go talk to the great teacher who made a difference in their lives, and ask them about the experience of being a teacher and what it's like and what the rewards are. And then I send them to see Rachel.
Oh, that's the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So, according to a 2010 McKinsey study entitled Closing the Talent Gap, nearly half of today's teachers will retire by 2020. And this gives the US an amazing opportunity to fill those vacancies with exceptional minds who are well prepared for the teaching profession. And SPREES intends to take advantage of this opportunity. Of course, the Stanford Pre-Education Society provides guidance and mentorship and support to students who have already discovered their passion for education. But our responsibilities extend above and beyond the typical pre-professional society. We must also reach out to those students who have never considered a career in education at all. And we must provide them with the opportunities to discover and explore the possibilities of a career in education. And perhaps most important, we need to create and foster a community among aspiring education professionals at Stanford, which we are in the pleasant process of discovering number to so many more than I think most of us realize. So far, 84 students have filled out the SPREES interest form, and 57 of those have indicated an interest in K through 12 teaching.
All right.
And we anticipate those numbers to grow as we become more and more well-known. So to learn more about SPREES, please visit our new website, sprees.stanford.edu. It's in its infancy, so keep checking on it as we add to it throughout the rest of the quarter and the year. On the back of your programs, there are also more links to access more information about SPREES, to sign up for our email list, to get involved, and to fill out a feedback form on tonight's event. So, there are many appreciations that are in order. And first, I'd like to thank Professor Christine Watipka for her guidance and her mentorship from the very beginning. She is the official SPREES advisor and a resident fellow of the Education and Society Theme House, or EAST, which co-sponsored this event with us tonight. So thank you, Christine. I'd also like to thank the Graduate School of Education for also co-sponsoring this event with us tonight, with their generous funding and their immense advertising support. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Jennifer Wolf for her much-needed guidance leading up to this event, and for spectacularly teaching Ed 101, Intro to Teaching and Learning, which had a profound impact on me when I took it last year, and by extension was pivotal to the conception of SPREEs. So thank you, Jennifer.
All right, then.
Of course, I have to thank the SPREEs leadership team. They've been working so hard on this, and without their passion for our cause, this event would not have been possible. So thank you, guys. So I'm here with you. I think all of us want to thank our 4 panelists for taking time out of their incredibly busy schedules tonight to be here with us. I know that my classmates so deeply admire and respect you, and so to hear you encourage us to pursue careers in education is no small thing. And the SPREEs debut is everything we could have hoped for and more because of you. So thank you so, so much for everything. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you in the audience who came out here tonight to support SPREEs and to listen to this very important conversation. My worst fear is that this conversation will dissolve after we all leave this auditorium. So it is my hope that all of you will continue this conversation in your communities and that this particular discussion can gain traction in education reform. And so I'd like to end with a quote from Closing the Talent Gap, which I mentioned earlier. It's a very simple idea, and yet it's one that really struck me when I read it. And that is, the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. Mm-hmm. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Let's all thank Julia, too.
Great job.